What's up guys, Duke here. Wanted to talk to you today all about good or food. So I'm sure all of you have heard that question in chat many times, good or food. And honestly, that's a misleading question. It's a false dichotomy. Most monsters in this game are neither good nor food, but they might be useful later. That's why it's really important, and that's why I follow this rule: never feed a non-farmable mob. Typically that means all 4 stars, of course 5-star mobs that you summon, but as well as the light and dark 3-star monsters. So why is that? Well, let me give you a few notable examples from some monsters that I personally fed back in 2014 when these monsters didn't have any use, or these monsters were not buffed to be useful quite yet. So one monster that I've been missing this whole time is Eshir. So I fed Eshir. Eshir right now is a pretty useful bruiser, especially for Guild Wars, especially nice against Theomars, because Eshir's 3rd skill here, it was buffed, and it can actually remove Theomar's buff, and therefore it can basically one-shot him if you have enough HP and crit damage on Eshir. So I fed him a long time ago, haven't gotten him back. You know, I get by fine without him, but it certainly would have been nice to have him. Another one that I fed actually was Jultan, and again, he's mostly used for his passive here, as well as, which is nice, it gives essentially every time he gets crit, he inflicts damage back. He also weakens defense, and he also blocks the HP recovery and has some stuns here. So he's a pretty useful monster, especially since he was buffed. And again, I fed him because he really didn't have much use back before he was buffed. And yet again, there was also certain game content that was put into the game, namely Guild Wars, that made Eshir and Jultan all that much more useful. Arena was always around, right? But these are especially 2 useful monsters for Guild Wars. There is another monster that I fed that I've regretted for quite a while now as well. Where is he? I saw the non-awakened version a second ago. Ah, right there. So it's Thrain, and Thrain is really nice for TOA hard. Now, I clear TOA hard every month anyway without Thrain, but he just makes life easier, especially on some stages. This skill right here is really nice because it actually puts dots up, but it does not do any damage, and so it's great against those monsters such as Jultan, or even the Yetis, etc., who have some sort of passive that really hurts you when you attack them. So in this case, it doesn't cause an attack, so you can stack up those dots no problem. He also has some nice stuns that follow up the dots here, and that makes him a really nice mob for TOA. Another example of a mob that most people thought was really utterly useless when the game first came out, but became one of the top tier mobs for Necro when that was released, was Shiwa. I fed her a long time ago, and I would still like one, but you know, at this point my Necro team is fine without her. I have a pretty fairly fast team, but she really is at the core of a lot of speed Necro teams. And why is that? Well, she does continuous damage here. Her sleep no longer attempts to sleep bosses, by the way, so this is a really nice buff for her. And then she inflicts branding and attacks 5 times. She has lots of multi-attacks. She does a lot of damage. She even has a good leader skill because a lot of the best Necro mobs are fire-based. So she was a great mob for Necro. I fed her, I regret it, still haven't gotten her back. The good news is, by the way, that Thrain is actually going to be the upcoming Guardian Arena reward this week, so I should be able to snag a Thrain or two this week and next week. But actually, I already have Hemos built, and so I'm not even sure I'll build Thrain anymore. You can see I have Hemos here, and Hemos is very similar to Thrain, same second skill. Only the third skill really is different. And the skill is actually not terrible for bosses. Slowing is sort of useful, and freezing is nice CC. But typically people would prefer Thrain rather than Hemos. Hemos is the farmable option for those of us who don't have or who fed Thrain. So you can also see that I have a lot of monsters here in storage. I have a lot of 6 stars in storage basically because I don't really use them that often. So I put them away just so I can have more space for making food and stuff. But I also keep a lot of other monsters here that I haven't built yet in storage. So you can see, hold on, I have issues scrolling. Yeah, you can see a lot of, phantom thieves and ninjas and bombers and samurais and whatnot. And these monsters all have some uses, right? But typically I already have teams for the monsters' uses, so I don't really need these monsters necessarily. But who knows? Maybe something will, some game content will be introduced that makes these monsters incredibly useful. One great example of that would be Colleen. So prior to Necro, very few people use Colleen. But now, a lot of people use Colleen for Necro and especially for raids. She's a really common raid healer, and she's almost ubiquitous. Another good example would be Diaz. And Diaz was kind of considered, again, like the poor man's Darien before, but now Diaz is considered one of the best frontline tank debuffers. And that's partially because of his passive that reduces damage on his allies as well as critical hits on himself. And he also has some nice debuffs, in particular HP, recovery block, as well as attack and defense debuffs for raids, which are really useful and important. So these are a couple of monsters that, again, I kept them in my storage, and they ended up becoming very useful for me once new game content was released. So just because a monster right now isn't necessarily useful. So for example, I don't know, let's say Wind Magic Knight. She is a rune mule for me. She just has a lot of random runes I might use later. Right now she doesn't have any huge use in the game. She's not really a meta mob. But who knows, maybe there'll be some content released down the road that could make her useful. Or she might receive buffs. Right now we have some upcoming skill balances. Us is really good about updating monster skills to try to keep up with the meta and change things up a little bit, balance out monsters. So keep that in mind next time you ask the question, good or food, the correct answer is oftentimes neither. Instead of eating your 4-star mobs, put them in storage. The same thing with your light and dark mobs, 3 stars. And instead, level up fodder. So you can see I have a lot of rainbow mons there for fodder. Here I have some other random monsters I've leveled up for fodder. So use those for food to make your 6 stars instead of using the monsters that you've summoned that you can't farm. I've heard of people regretting monsters that they fed, again, almost 2 years ago, such as I did. So you don't want to be one of those people. You would think that some of these light dark natural 3 stars would be easy to get for me because I get, multiple light and darks every month, 2 from TOA, and then typically I get enough pieces from, random pieces to at least open another light dark scroll. So we're talking maybe 3 a month, and plus the daily login, so that's maybe another 4 a month. And sometimes they have those for events as well, up to 5 a month for the past 1.5 years. And I still haven't gotten Thrain or Escher or Jultan out of all those scrolls. So hopefully this will help you when you're making decisions about which monsters you should use, which monsters you should feed, and especially which monsters you should store. So hopefully this is helpful for all of you. Be sure to like if you found it useful and subscribe to keep them coming. Thanks.